Hey, I'm Chance, and welcome back to Game Table Adventures. And today we're going to be taking a look at the original Gamma World, 1978. Let's talk about it. So here it is, guys. The original Gamma World. And I am privileged, absolutely fucking privileged to bring this to you. This book is a genuine antique. From the early days of yore of gaming, TSR Games, long before Wizards of the Coast, long before home computers even, or the internet. Back in the golden days of yore of gaming. Now let's take a look. Good forward. Now Gamma World is a campaign setting for Dungeons and Dragons. It uses D&D Advanced, and it has a lot of its own stuff to it, which is pretty fucking cool. It is incredibly fragile. I am just being as careful as I can be with this book. But here we can get a good look at the table of contents. I am just absolutely stoked. And just look at this. The detail and the care that was put into this. This was written by Gary Gygax. No. James M. Ward and Gary Jaquette. Fuck me. Alright, I was wrong. But God, this is so old school. There is nothing like the tactile feel and smell of a book. Look at this old school artwork. And here we have just how to use the book, dice in Gamma World, designing Gamma World. Just so much. And it covers a lot of how a campaign setting looked then versus how it looks now. Most of you have probably looked at, modern campaign settings, such as Legend of the Five Rings, or Iron Kingdom's Requiem, which are great 5th edition settings, and I hope to cover eventually in this series. But just look at this. The stunning detail that they went into. And the artwork. The story of Gamma World is the story of fallen civilization, the aftermath, the ruins. You can pretty clearly see that this is the early forerunner of things like D20 Apocalypse, which cover even a lot of the same kinds of tables. Mutated humanoids, mutated animals, basic attributes. A lot of stuff that you'd find in the second ed player's handbook. But it goes into detail here again. And this is a section for building characters. Just so much. And the artwork in it, while old, is still stunning. This is drawn by hand. In a time before digital art or touch-ups, this had to be really well done. And look at some of these tables, mutations. I mean, just really sink your teeth into that. When I was a kid, I had heard of Gamma World, but I never got to play it. And as an adult, I absolutely never thought I'd fucking be going through it, reading the book. I mean, fat cell accumulation, gas generation, heat generation, height balance. Look at a lot of these are mutations and abilities that would find immediate successors in D20 Apocalypse. A book I used to own, lament losing, and will try to replace at some point. And hopefully I can do a review. But just look at this. This is from a time of gaming when video games weren't even a thing yet. Pen and paper dice were the way gamers were. It's a simpler time when we weren't trying to digitize absolutely everything. And not everything had to make perfect sense. It's a campaign setting, sure, but it has no hard and specific details that you'd find in a modern campaign setting. It has none of the, frankly, ludicrous amounts of detail that you would find. You know, we talk about specific cities and characters and NPCs, and this just goes, no, this is kind of how the world works, kind of what you do, and this is basically how you run it. You're the DM, you make the world. And I love that seat of your pants, let the DM create kind of design. I mean, look at some of these. These are ridiculous abilities. Telepathic, teleportation, and just the detail that these guys went into. I mean, distance traveled, time. Newer D&D seems to have gone, over the years, to a point of getting rid of the detail, getting rid of the complexity. And that's something that I feel cheapens. It makes the game less. Yes, it makes it more accessible for new players. But in a lot of ways, here we are, plant and vegetable mutations, plenty of interesting ones. It changes the experience. It makes it less in depth. And I guess there's that line of thinking that story trumps rules. But I'm kind of a rules guy. I'm kind of a Gygaxian kind of guy. I think that when you take away a lot of the rules and you take away a lot of the very specifics of a campaign or campaign setting or a system, you take something away from it that you can't really replace. It is an essence to the game that just, I feel like we've lost. I'm not saying that everything needs a rule or a class or an ability, but perhaps 5e has dumbed it down too much. 4th edition, they tried to make combat more engaging, more dynamic, and it failed. And the polar opposite of that is to dumb everything down. This is a nice balance. Is 2nd Ed my favorite system? No, not by a long shot. I'm a 3-5 guy. But come on, look at this physical combat. And it goes into detail on changes to combat. This is obviously an accessory to 2nd edition D&D, Dungeons & Dragons, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. But it also, I mean, look at this. Powered attack and assault armors. They used simplicity, yes, but they had so many options. And the book was able to convey so many new ideas. Dungeons & Dragons is a magic and swords and sandals kind of game. But here they cover advanced technology, and it doesn't necessarily take a lot out of what's there. You know, you can... It's jaw-dropping. Look at the art. Look at this art. I mean, these tables, this book. I mean, I've been going over everything in detail. This looks to be creatures. Yeah, these are all creatures. And stat blocks, this is something that I agree with in 5e. Bringing monster stat blocks back to a reasonable size. There's only so much you really need to cover. Here's where we start getting into vehicles. Look at this. Detailed tables for rolling, just for something as simple as figuring out how to drive a car. This book talks about computers. A little coffee stain. It shows its age. It shows that people played this. It smells like a musty old book. And that might not sound appealing to everybody, but I love the physical, tactile medium of a book. You can touch it. You can feel it. You really own it. It's not a user license agreement. It's not something that I only have access to because I pay a monthly subscription. It is a real, physical copy of a book that actually exists. Gaming is something that I feel should remain in the in-person, tactile realm, at least for the most part. I play online because it's easier to get my friends together who have moved all over the country. But I don't need that. It's not a crutch. I can play without the VTT. In person, with real people. Look at this. They had fucking lightsabers. Lightsabers. Shit on toast. That's pretty cool, actually. Huh. They don't have lightsabers in fucking D20 Apocalypse. And that's what I feel like this is this is the early version of what we got in D20 Apocalypse. It is a forerunner. And I have a lot of great stories. A lot of wonderful memories of 3.5 and the D20 system in general. Here we're going over rockets and missiles and robotic arms and miscellaneous energy devices. We've got maps and eras of play, example of play, showing you stuff that is probably already covered for the most part in fucking D&D, but anything that has a new flavor gets, or has a new factor to it, gets brought here in detail. Not too much, but not too little. I've only read a little bit of this book, and I've thumbed through it fairly extensively. And I just wanted to show this artwork. See, look. It shows a computer on a desk. A home computer. Think about that. This is 1978. In a way, this predicted shit that wouldn't come around for another fucking 20 years. It wasn't until the 90s that people started having computers in almost every home. And even then, not every home. I remember when I was in high school in the early 2000s, and the fact that I had my own computer was kind of a big deal. I mean, think about how far we've come. And do I think that technology has enriched the gaming experience? Yes. An emphatic and absolute yes. But you've got to respect this old school stuff. Metric English conversions. Stuff that you'd typically find in a textbook and most people would just Google today. But because players might need it, here it is. And in time before Google, every little piece of information that was needed was printed. And sometimes they missed stuff. There's a lot of stuff that'll get covered in this series that probably had holes in it. But this was a different time, man. And with the advent of things like Stranger Things, people are getting a nostalgia for this classic gaming. Exactly as it was. I would love to see Wizards do a reprint of Gamma World. Just here we are at the end of the book. And it's time to take a look at this. This is the map that came with Gamma World. Does it look familiar? It should. This is a view of the United States. And let's take a quick look. Well, some of this would be Mexico, Texas. But where's Florida? Or Louisiana, for that matter. So much detail, so much thought was put into everything that came in this book. And it is impressive. Privileging. To get to see, I don't even know if that's a fucking word. I feel privileged. I feel like I'm getting to see something special. That I'm getting to touch a piece of history. And that is just phenomenal. This is nuts. Gamma World. Not a hell of a lot of these floating around these days. You know, this is so obscure, rare. I don't even know if it came out in a hardback. And it's got some age to it. The staples are coming out of the spine. It needs redone. If they ever reprint this, I would say 100% buy this. If this has interested you at all, go find a PDF. There's got to be one somewhere. It's these older games that I think can kind of bridge the gap for older and younger players. I don't know. But, I'm Chance. This has been Game Table Adventures. Keep adventuring. Oh man, it's hot.